On a foggy evening, Tom Reynolds exits an upscale restaurant, his laughter echoing through the dimly lit street. He's just finished a business dinner where he couldn't stop boasting about his recent promotion. "Another step up the corporate ladder, gentlemen," he announces, adjusting his expensive tie. "Soon, I'll be running this town." His colleagues exchange worried glances. "Tom, maybe you should take it easy tonight," one of them suggests, concern evident in his voice. But Tom dismisses the advice with a wave of his hand. "Nonsense. This calls for celebration." Striding confidently to his luxury sports car, Tom fumbles with his keys, still chuckling to himself. He slides into the driver's seat, the leather interior creaking beneath him. Without a second thought, he starts the engine and cranks up the radio. The pulsing beat of a popular song fills the car, drowning out the gentle patter of rain on the windshield. As he pulls away from the curb, Tom barely notices the flashing yellow lights warning of wet roads ahead. His mind is elsewhere, replaying the moments of triumph from earlier in the evening. He presses down on the accelerator, feeling a rush of adrenaline as the car surges forward. The city streets blur past as Tom weaves through traffic, ignoring speed limits and common sense alike. He feels invincible, untouchable. The rain intensifies, but Tom pays it no mind. He's too caught up in his own world of success and self-importance. Suddenly, a figure appears in his headlights. There's a moment of horrible clarity as Tom realizes what's about to happen. He slams on the brakes, but it's too late. A sickening thud and a piercing scream cut through the night. Tom's car skids to a stop, and he sees a woman's body crumpled on the wet pavement. Sarah Thompson, a dedicated social worker, lies motionless in the street, her life forever altered by Tom's reckless actions. The consequences of his arrogance are about to unfold, setting in motion a chain of events that will force Tom to confront the person he's become and the damage he's caused. Tom's heart races as he stares at Sarah's motionless body through the rain-streaked windshield. Panic grips him, his mind frantically cycling through possible outcomes. He should get out, check on her, call for help. But fear and self-preservation take over. With shaking hands, Tom shifts the car into reverse. He can't face the consequences. Not now, not when he's at the peak of his career. He tells himself she might be fine, just stunned. It's easier to believe that lie than confront the truth. He speeds away from the scene, tires screeching on the wet asphalt. His eyes dart between the road ahead and the rearview mirror, watching the prone figure grow smaller in the distance. The weight of his decision settles in his stomach like lead. Tom's usual confident driving is replaced by erratic movements. He swerves through side streets, trying to put as much distance as possible between himself and his actions. But his mind is elsewhere, replaying the moment of impact over and over. In his distracted state, Tom fails to notice he's circled back near the accident site. The community center where Sarah worked looms ahead, its warm lights a stark contrast to the darkness of Tom's actions. Suddenly, a car pulls out in front of him. Tom jerks the wheel, overcorrecting in his panic. The car spins out of control, tires losing traction on the wet road. With a sickening crunch, the vehicle slams into a lamppost directly in front of the community center. The airbag deploys, leaving Tom dazed but largely unharmed. As he struggles to orient himself, he becomes aware of voices outside. People are gathering, drawn by the sound of the crash. Some recognize his distinctive car, pointing and shouting for others to call for help. Disoriented and with nowhere left to run, Tom stumbles out of the wreckage. The faces of the onlookers swim before him, their expressions a mix of concern and growing suspicion. He's trapped now, not just by the crowd, but by the weight of his own choices. Sirens pierce the night as an ambulance rushes Sarah to the hospital. Inside, paramedics work frantically to stabilize her condition. BP dropping, one calls out, adjusting in 4-line. Possible internal bleeding. The urgency in their voices betrays the severity of Sarah's injuries. Meanwhile, at the accident site, a somber crowd gathers. Word of Sarah's identity spreads quickly through the tight-knit community. Many know her from her tireless work at the community center. They form an impromptu vigil, lighting candles that flicker in the damp night air. Tom stands at the edge of the crowd, unnoticed for now. The gravity of his actions begins to sink in as he watches people openly weeping, comforting each other. He overhears snippets of conversation, such a kind soul, always helping others who could do such a thing. Each word is a dagger of guilt twisting in his gut. As the vigil grows, Tom notices a familiar face approaching. It's Mark, a former colleague he hadn't seen in years. Mark's expression is grim as he recognizes Tom. "I thought that was your car," he says, his tone a mix of disappointment and disbelief. Mark pulls Tom aside, away from the crowd. "Remember that youth mentorship program you promised to fund last year?" he asks. "The one you said was a waste of time and money?" Tom nods, the memory flooding back. He had dismissed the idea, too focused on his own career advancement. "Sarah took it on herself," Mark continues. "She's been running it on a shoestring budget, changing lives left and right." He gestures to the gathered crowd. "Half these kids wouldn't be in school if it wasn't for her." Tom's carefully constructed world of success and self-importance begins to crumble. He sees the ripple effect of his past decisions, culminating in this night's tragedy. The contrast between Sarah's selfless dedication and his own selfish pursuits is stark and undeniable. As dawn breaks, Tom remains rooted to the spot, watching the community rally around one of their own. He realizes that while he's been climbing the corporate ladder, he's left a trail of broken promises and missed opportunities to make a real difference. The path to redemption, if one exists, seems impossibly long and arduous from where he stands. As Sarah fights for her life in the hospital, her impact on the community becomes increasingly apparent. In her hospital room, machines beep steadily, monitoring her vital signs. Nurses speak in hushed tones about her condition, their faces reflecting concern for a patient they've come to admire. Flashbacks of Sarah's life play out like a montage of selflessness. We see her organizing food drives, staying late at the community center to help struggling students, and advocating tirelessly for better resources in underserved neighborhoods. Her dedication stands in stark contrast to Tom's self-centered pursuits. Outside the hospital, media vans crowd the parking lot. Reporters clamor for updates on Sarah's condition and details about the hit and run. Tom watches the coverage from his living room, his face ashen. The gravity of his actions is no longer a private burden, but a public spectacle. Tom's phone rings incessantly. Calls from his lawyer, his company's PR team, and investigators pile up. Each voicemail carries a tone of urgency and barely concealed disappointment. The life he's built is crumbling around him, and he feels powerless to stop it. Despite the advice of his lawyer to lay low, Tom finds himself drawn to the hospital. He slips in, unnoticed among the stream of visitors bringing flowers and well wishes for Sarah. Standing outside her room, he watches through the window as doctors check her vitals. Even in her comatose state, Sarah's presence seems to radiate warmth. Tom observes the gentle way nurses care for her, the tearful visits from community members, the handmade cards from children she's helped. He realizes that Sarah's impact goes far beyond her job description. She's touched countless lives in ways he never considered important. As he leaves the hospital, Tom is confronted by a group of reporters. Cameras flash, and questions are hurled at him rapid fire. "Mr. Reynolds, did you flee the scene of the accident? Do you have any comment on the allegations against you?" He pushes past them, offering no comment, but their words follow him, echoing the accusations in his own mind. Back home, Tom sits in his darkened study, surrounded by accolades and awards that suddenly seem meaningless. He picks up a framed photo of himself receiving a Business Leader of the Year award. The smiling face looking back at him feels like a stranger now. For the first time, he truly grapples with the disconnect between his professional success and his moral failings. The strain of recent events takes a heavy toll on Tom's personal life, particularly his marriage. His wife, Lisa, paces in their lavish living room, her face a mix of anger and disappointment. "I can't believe you, Tom," she says, her voice trembling. "All these years, I've supported your ambition, but this is too far." Tom tries to explain, but his words sound hollow even to his own ears. Lisa cuts him off. "It's always been about you, hasn't it? Your career, your success, your image. When was the last time you thought about anyone else?" Her words hit home, forcing Tom to confront the selfishness that has defined his life. Seeking a way to make amends, Tom finds himself drawn back to the community center where Sarah worked. He hesitates at the entrance, aware of the whispers and pointed looks from those who recognize him. Inside, he's struck by the contrast between the center's worn-down appearance and the vibrant energy of the people within. Tom approaches the center's director, introducing himself awkwardly. "I want to help," he stammers, and used to asking rather than commanding. The director eyes him warily, but listens as Tom proposes funding a new youth support program. It's a start, a small step towards redemption, but Tom feels the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. As days pass, Tom becomes a regular fixture at the center. He rolls up his sleeves, painting walls, tutoring students, and listening to their stories. Each interaction chips away at the arrogant facade he's maintained for so long. He begins to understand the real impact of community work, something he dismissed as insignificant compared to his corporate conquests. The new program takes shape under Tom's guidance and funding. He watches as young people who reminded him of his own troubled youth find direction and purpose. For the first time in years, Tom feels a sense of fulfillment that no business deal ever provided. Lisa notices the change in Tom. One evening, she finds him poring over budget reports for the center instead of his usual corporate documents. "You're different," she observes, a hint of hope in her voice. Tom looks up, realizing that his journey towards change is not just affecting him, but those around him as well. As news of Tom's involvement with the center spreads, public opinion begins to shift. Some view his efforts with skepticism, seeing it as a ploy for leniency in his upcoming legal battles. Others, particularly those directly benefiting from the new programs, start to see a glimmer of genuine change in the man they once vilified. 6 weeks after the accident, Sarah finally emerges from her coma. The hospital room buzzes with cautious optimism as doctors assess her condition. However, it quickly becomes apparent that Sarah's recovery is far from complete. She blinks in confusion, her eyes darting around the unfamiliar surroundings. "Where am I?" Sarah asks, her voice barely above a whisper. The doctor gently explains her situation, but it's clear that Sarah is struggling to process the information. "I don't remember any of this," she admits, frustration and fear evident in her voice. Word of Sarah's awakening spreads quickly. Tom, who has been keeping tabs on her condition, feels a mix of relief and apprehension. He decides to visit her, hoping to finally face the consequences of his actions. As Tom enters Sarah's room, he's struck by how small and vulnerable she looks in the hospital bed. He clears his throat, preparing to introduce himself, but Sarah's blank stare stops him short. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" she asks politely. Before Tom can respond, a group of Sarah's students bursts into the room, their faces lighting up at the sight of their beloved mentor. They crowd around her bed, sharing stories and inside jokes, oblivious to Tom's presence. Sarah's eyes sparkle as she interacts with the students, even though she can't remember specific details about them. Her innate compassion and warmth shine through, despite her memory loss. Tom watches this interaction, feeling like an intruder in a moment of genuine connection. One of the students notices Tom and recognizes him from his visits to the community center. "Oh, Mr. Reynolds, are you here to tell Sarah about the new program?" the young boy asks excitedly. Sarah turns to Tom, curiosity replacing her earlier blank expression. "Program? Are you involved with the center?" she inquires. Tom stumbles over his words, unsure how to explain his complicated relationship to the situation. "Yes, I've been helping out lately." "It's good to see you awake, Sarah," he manages to say. As the visit continues, Tom observes Sarah's interactions with her students. Despite her memory loss, her natural instinct to nurture and support is evident. She listens intently to their stories, offering words of encouragement even when she can't recall specific details. Tom feels a growing sense of connection to the community he once ignored. He realizes that Sarah's impact goes far beyond her conscious memories. It's ingrained in the lives she's touched and the relationships she's fostered. This realization deepens his commitment to continue the work he started, not just for Sarah, but for all those who depend on the center's support. The day of Tom's legal hearing arrives, casting a somber atmosphere over the community. The courthouse steps are crowded with reporters and curious onlookers as Tom makes his way inside, flanked by his legal team. His face is a mask of composure, but his eyes betray the turmoil within. Inside the courtroom, Tom sits rigidly as the proceedings begin. The prosecutor presents a damning case, detailing Tom's reckless driving and subsequent flight from the scene. Evidence is methodically laid out: traffic camera footage, witness statements, and forensic reports from Tom's damaged vehicle. As witnesses are called to testify, Tom's carefully constructed facade begins to crumble. Former colleagues speak of his cutthroat business practices and disregard for others. However, the tone shifts when members of the community center take the stand. A young student, visibly nervous, describes how Tom's recent involvement has expanded their after-school programs. "He's not the same person they're talking about," the student insists, gesturing towards the prosecution. "He's been there every day, helping us." The community center's director provides a balanced perspective. "While I can't condone Mr. Reynolds' initial actions, I've seen a marked change in him," she testifies. He's taken responsibility in ways that go beyond mere legal obligation. As Tom listens to these accounts, the full weight of his journey hits him. He sees clearly the contrast between the man he was and the person he's striving to become. In a moment of clarity, he realizes what he needs to do. Against his lawyer's advice, Tom stands and addresses the court. "Your Honor, if I may," he begins, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. "I'd like to change my plea to guilty." A murmur ripples through the courtroom. Tom's lawyer attempts to intervene, but Tom presses on. "I've spent weeks hiding behind legal maneuvers and PR strategies," he continues. "But the truth is, I made a terrible choice that night. And every day since, I've had to face the consequences of that choice, not just legally, but in seeing the impact of Sarah's absence on her community." Tom's voice breaks slightly as he concludes, "I can't undo what I've done, but I can stop running from it. I'm guilty, Your Honor. And I'm ready to face whatever punishment the court deems appropriate." The judge listens intently, his expression unreadable. As Tom retakes his seat, a heavy silence falls over the courtroom. The path ahead is uncertain, but for the first time since the accident, Tom feels the burden of his secret lifting. He's taken the first real step towards redemption, not in the eyes of the law, but in his own conscience. The courtroom falls silent as Tom concludes his impromptu speech. The judge, a stern-faced woman with graying hair, peers over her glasses at him. "Mr. Reynolds," she begins, her tone measured, "your change of plea is noted. However, given the severity of the charges, I'll need to hear more before we proceed." Tom nods, understanding the gravity of the moment. He stands again, this time more composed, ready to bare his soul to the court and the community he's wronged. "Your Honor, members of the court," Tom starts, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I stand before you not to make excuses, but to acknowledge my failures as a human being. On that night, I chose my reputation over a woman's life. I fled from responsibility, from basic human decency." He turns to face the gallery, where Sarah's family and members of the community sit. "To Sarah's family, I can't begin to express the depth of my remorse. Your daughter, your friend, your colleague, she represents everything I should have aspired to be but wasn't." Tom continues, detailing his journey since the accident, his initial panic, his gradual realization of the impact of his actions, and his efforts at the community center. "I don't share these efforts to earn leniency," he clarifies. "I share them because they've shown me the person I should have been all along." As Tom speaks, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifts. Some members of the community who came in anger find themselves conflicted, seeing a glimpse of genuine remorse and change. Sarah's parents, though still grief-stricken, exchange glances that suggest a softening of their hardened stance. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Tom concludes, his voice cracking slightly. "I'm asking for the chance to spend every day making amends, not just to Sarah and her family, but to a community I've neglected for far too long. Whatever the court decides, I commit myself to this path of redemption." As Tom sits down, a murmur ripples through the courtroom. The judge calls for order, then addresses Tom directly. "Mr. Reynolds, your words are compelling, but actions speak louder. This court will need time to consider all aspects of this case before rendering a decision." Outside the courthouse, the community's reaction is mixed. Some still call for harsh punishment, while others advocate for a sentence that allows Tom to continue his work at the center. The debate rages on social media and in local cafes. Sarah, now recovering at home, watches the news coverage of Tom's speech. Despite her lingering memory issues, she feels a connection to his words. She turns to her nurse and says, I think I'd like to meet him properly." It's a small step, but one that opens the door to potential healing for both Sarah and Tom. As the day ends, Tom returns to the community center. He's greeted with a mix of supportive nods and cautious glances. Regardless of a legal outcome, he knows his journey of redemption is just beginning. He rolls up his sleeves and gets to work, more committed than ever to making a positive impact on the lives around him. In the weeks following the court hearing, Tom immerses himself deeper in his work at the community center. The legal proceedings hang over him like a shadow, but he finds solace in the day-to-day tasks of helping others. His office, once filled with corporate trophies, now overflows with letters from community members. Tom sits at his desk, sifting through the day's mail. The letters range from scathing condemnations to heartfelt thanks. He reads each one, forcing himself to confront the full spectrum of reactions to his actions and subsequent efforts at redemption. One letter catches his eye. It's from Jake, a troubled teen Tom had been mentoring. The boy's words are raw and honest. "Mr. Reynolds, when you first came to the center, I thought you were just another rich guy trying to buy forgiveness. But you stuck around. You listened. You cared. I'm back in school now, and it's because you showed me I could be more than my mistakes." Tom's hand shakes slightly as he rereads Jake's letter. He remembers their first meeting. Jake, sullen and distrustful. Tom, awkward and out of his depth. Their journey together parallels Tom's own path to redemption. Another letter arrives, this one from a local business owner. "Your actions were reprehensible, but your commitment to change is noteworthy." Perhaps there's a lesson here for all of us about the power of second chances. As Tom contemplates these messages, he realizes that true change isn't just about grand gestures or public apologies. It's about the small, consistent actions that rebuild trust and reshape character. He picks up a framed photo on his desk, a group shot from a recent community cleanup day. Tom stands in the background, not front and center as he would have once positioned himself, but part of the team. His smile in the photo is genuine, a stark contrast to the forced grins of his corporate headshots. A knock on the door interrupts his reflections. It's Mark, his former colleague who first reminded him of his broken promises. "Got a minute?" Mark asked, his tone serious. Tom nods, bracing himself. Mark has been one of his harshest critics throughout this ordeal. "I've been watching you, Tom," Mark begins. "Really watching. At first, I thought this was all an act, a way to save your skin. But I've seen how you've changed, how you're changing this community." Mark pauses, choosing his words carefully. "What you did was terrible. But what you're doing now, it matters. It's making a difference." Tom absorbs Mark's words, feeling a mix of gratitude and renewed determination. He realizes that redemption isn't a destination but an ongoing journey, one that requires constant effort and self-reflection. As Mark leaves, Tom turns back to his desk, to the pile of letters representing the lives he's touched and the lives he's hurt. He picks up a pen and begins to write responses, knowing that each word, each action, is another step on his path to becoming the person he should have been all along. Months have passed, and the community center bustles with activity as it prepares for its annual fundraising event. Tom, now a fixture at the center, helps hang decorations while chatting with volunteers. The atmosphere is light, a stark contrast to the tension that once surrounded his presence. As the event begins, community members file in, their chatter filling the room. Tom notices Sarah enter, supported by her friend and colleague Michael. She's made significant progress in her recovery, though she still struggles with some memory issues. Tom gives her a respectful nod, which she returns with a small smile. The evening progresses smoothly until Michael takes the stage, his face grave. "Before we continue," he announces, his voice cutting through the cheerful noise, "there's something everyone needs to know." The room falls silent as Michael recounts the night of Sarah's accident, revealing Tom's role in detail. Gasps and murmurs ripple through the crowd. Some people turn to stare at Tom, their expressions a mix of shock and renewed anger. Tom stands frozen, his heart racing. He'd been working towards this moment of truth, but now that it's here, he feels unprepared. With all eyes on him, Tom slowly makes his way to the stage. His hands tremble as he takes the microphone. "What Michael said is true," he begins, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. "I was the one who hit Sarah that night, and I fled the scene. It was the worst decision of my life, one I've been trying to atone for ever since." He continues, addressing the stunned audience. "I know my work here doesn't erase what I did. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm here because I believe in what we're doing, and because I owe it to Sarah and to all of you to be better than I was that night." The room is divided. Some people shout angrily, demanding Tom leave. Others, particularly those who've worked closely with him at the center, stand in quiet support. Sarah, her face a mask of conflicting emotions, remains seated, processing this revelation. Just as the situation threatens to escalate, Michael steps forward again. "I brought this truth to light not to divide us," he says, his tone softer now. "But because I've seen the change in Tom. I was angry. I wanted revenge. But watching him work tirelessly for this community, seeing the life he's helped change, I realized that the man who fled that night is not the same man standing before us today." Michael's words hang in the air, shifting the mood of the room. He turns to Tom, extending his hand. "I can't forget what happened, but I can acknowledge the good you're doing now. We all make mistakes. It's what we do after that defines us." As Tom shakes Michael's hand, A tentative applause begins, growing stronger. It's not universal forgiveness, but it's an acknowledgement of the complex nature of redemption and the power of genuine change. Sarah slowly makes her way to the stage. Standing before Tom, she speaks softly but clearly. I may not remember the accident, but I've seen your dedication to this community. It doesn't erase the past, but it does show me who you're trying to become. I think that's something worth supporting. As the event winds down, Tom finds himself surrounded by a mix of people, some offering words of support, others asking tough questions about his past and his intentions. He answers each one honestly, knowing that rebuilding trust is an ongoing process. The night ends with a sense of cautious hope. Tom's journey of redemption is far from over, but for the first time, he feels truly accepted by the community, not as the man he was, but as the man he's striving to be. As he helps clean up, Tom realizes that his transformation isn't just about personal redemption. It's about the ripple effect of positive change in a community willing to give second chances.